Hello, everyone, and welcome to Encounter Church. My name is Sam. I'm the hospitality director here, and I just want to welcome you to our digital worship experience. This is something we put together every weekend so you can encounter God wherever you are. We'll begin shortly with a message from the scriptures, followed by worship. So we encourage you to stick around after the sermon to join us in worship. But for now, let's listen to this week's message.
Hey, good morning, Encounter. My name is Hedge. I'm the associate pastor at the Foundry Church in Baltimore, Maryland. It's been a little bit since I had the opportunity to be with you, and I am excited to be able to share with you today here digitally. Today we're going to be pausing the series of Renaissance, and we're going to be looking instead at this pretty incredible, kind of weird text from the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 5. Do you ever wonder where different idioms and phrases come from in the English language? I mean, in all different cultures, we have these different metaphoric phrases that we use to describe certain situations or certain events in our lives. And a lot of times they have quite interesting origin stories. I mean, honestly, sometimes when I am in conversation with people and they begin to use some of these idioms, I can't help but think, okay, where does this phrase originate from? Where's the etymology of these things, this metaphor? Let me share a couple with you of what they originally meant when they were said. The first one, riding shotgun. I'm sure that you have heard this before. When you jump into a car, you jump into the passenger seat and you say, I'm going to ride shotgun today, which means that you were sitting in the seat next to the driver. In the Wild West is where this originates. And the person who sat next to the driver oftentimes was equipped with a shotgun to protect themselves against robbers. Or how about this one? It costs an arm and a leg, which is a phrase that a lot of times we use when we say something is really, really expensive. This originates back in the 18th century when they would paint portraits of individuals at this time. A lot of times you will see them without any arms or legs in it, because in order to add their arms or their legs to the portrait, a lot of times it would cost more money. Or how about this one? Bite the bullet. I just have to bite the bullet and get this done. We use this sometimes when we have to do something that maybe we don't want to do, or something that's difficult that we know we have to put in the effort for. It may be unpleasant, it may be painful. And this stems from the 1800s when soldiers were in battle. The doctors would give their patients who needed surgery an actual bullet to bite on to help cope with the pain, because they didn't have anesthesia. The story we're going to be focusing on today is the origin of an idiom that you've probably heard before, the writing on the wall. Now, this story takes place in Daniel chapter 5. And I would encourage you, if you can, you could even pause the video right now and go and read Daniel 1 through 4 to kind of get the context of what we're going to be talking about here today. Or if you want to do that later in the day or in the week, that would help clarify even some of the conversations that we are going to focus on today. But in order to have this talk about what is going on in Daniel 5, let me rewind a little bit and share with you a little bit, just a sneak peek about what is happening in each one of those leading up chapters. First, in Daniel 1, we're introduced to this group of people, the Israelites who have been conquered by the Babylonian Empire. They are now enslaved by their oppressors, the Babylonians. And we meet some of these characters, such as Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They're brought into captivity as young men, in particular with this group of people. And they are brought there to perform in different ways. They're viewed as some of the cultural elitists because they're young, they're fit, and Babylon wants to take them for themselves. And one thing that is important to note here is just the reminder that these people were not doing this by choice, but instead they were slaves. And one of the ways that oftentimes empires, such as the Babylonian Empire, oppress different nations is by killing the culture that they came from. So the Babylonian culture oftentimes would want to oppress or kill the Hebrew culture from these Israelites. So, for example, one of the ways that they would do that is they would give them a new name. For example, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are four men that we learn about going into the Babylonian Empire. But we read in Daniel 1 that the chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. The story here in Daniel 1 focuses on the Israelites remaining faithful to God even when they find themselves in exile. In Daniel 2, we move to the next chapter where we read a story about King Nebuchadnezzar who has this dream, but he cannot interpret the meaning of this dream, and he calls all different people into his presence in order to explain what is happening. Daniel is the only one that is able to do it. And Daniel speaks of four major empires which will rise to power, the Babylonian Empire being the first. Then skip ahead to Daniel 3. We reconnect with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar has built this giant statue, and there's this expectation that whenever they would hear the sound of music play in the Babylonian Empire, that they would bow down and worship this statue. These three men that were introduced in chapter 1, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, decide not to. And the punishment for not bowing down and worshiping is to be thrown in a furnace. In short, these three men survive somehow, miraculously. It says that another was in the fire with them. And King Nebuchadnezzar cannot help but acknowledge the power of their God who saved them. Daniel 4 is where it gets super strange. If it's not already a little bit weird here in this book, Daniel 4 is kind of where it gets really, really strange. There's a story where King Nebuchadnezzar begins to live and to act like a cattle. Some commentators explain this as some sort of a rare psychiatric syndrome that involves delusions of an individual perceiving that they are actually an animal, transforming into an animal. This comes as Nebuchadnezzar claims success because of the Babylonian Empire. Our story today is going to reference this story, but again, we don't have time to get into the details about what is happening here, other than we read that King Nebuchadnezzar is claiming the success, and the result of claiming that success is that he is driven to the point that he is acting as a cattle. He is restored at the end of the chapter, which is where we kind of pick up today. Daniel is an interesting book, though, because as we share with each one of those chapters, is that each one of those chapters is a different length of time. It's a different point in the life of Daniel. There's multiple different time gaps that we find in this book because it highlights a few different moments from Daniel's life. We know that historically Nebuchadnezzar, the main character from Daniel 1 through 4, one of the main characters, he died in 562 BC. But our story takes place in 539 BC. So we're picking up 23 years later. So let's go ahead and dive into the text of Daniel 5. I'm going to read some of the verses, summarize other ones, so that way we can speed through this a little bit and understand the context of what is happening over a whole chapter here. So again, this text picks up 23 years after Daniel 4. It says this: Many years later, King Belshazzar gave a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles. He drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking the wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver cups that his predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. He wanted to drink from them with his nobles, his wives, and his concubine. So they brought these gold cups taken from the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. While they drank from them, they praised their idols, made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. So let's stop right here and answer a few questions that are coming up because of this text. First, who is Belshazzar? Well, after Nebuchadnezzar dies, there are a few leaders that hold power for a very short amount of time. Nabonidus is Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law, and he comes into power in 556 BC, which is shown to us in different sources, historically outside of the Bible even. And he rarely spends time in Babylon. And so Nabonidus then entrusts his son, Belshazzar, to rule the throne and act as the de facto king while he is away. But why is there a party going on? Well, there are a few theorized reasons from different commentators. Babylon had just suffered a massive military loss to the Medes and the Persians, who we know is going to be the second major empire predicted in Daniel 2. And all that was remaining in the Babylonian Empire was this one city of Babylon. So some believe that Belshazzar was trying to encourage his people, setting himself maybe even to take up after his dad had died. Or maybe there was a customary festival. It just so happened to occur the eve of the fall of the Babylonian Empire. Next question, what is unique about this party? First, the king was present. Belshazzar was there. Usually at a party like this, the king would be off in his VIP lounge. He wouldn't be there with everyone else. He'd allow all of his guests to enjoy the party. But secondly here, we find the king just flexing on everyone. Belshazzar is not holding back at all. He wants to impress people. He takes out the gold and the silver from the Jewish temples, which has been kept as a trophy, as they are used to desecrate what they stand for his own use. Let's keep reading this in Daniel 5. Suddenly, they saw the fingers of a human handwriting on the plaster wall of the king's palace near the lampstand. The king himself saw the hand as it wrote, and his face turned pale with fright. His knees knocked together in fear. His legs gave way beneath him. Now, I think that CGI technology has very much desensitized us to what is happening here. Why? Because Belshazzar is terrified. He sees this hand appear out of nowhere, and he begins to write on the wall. He begins to put this message there that he can't understand. And it's written next to a lampstand, which we know in a biblical context oftentimes means something that's illuminating a message. It is bringing light into a dark place, both actually and metaphorically in this text. The king calls in several different people to try to figure out what is happening. Can you please interpret what is happening? Because I am terrified, but no one can. They're supposed to be the experts in interpreting dreams, and they can't figure out what is happening. The queen mother runs in, and we don't know exactly who she is. She may be Nebuchadnezzar's widow. She may be Nabonidus' wife. We don't fully know. But either way, she knows Daniel. And she knows Daniel intimately enough to refer to him by his birth name, his Hebrew name, not his Babylonian name. She recounts the many times that Daniel was called before Nebuchadnezzar and his faithfulness and the ability to interpret miraculous things. So Belshazzar calls to Daniel, and he's brought before the king. And again, there's a passage of time. So Daniel now is in his 80s. He is offered purple robes, the color of royalty. He's offered the gold chain, which is a gift of honor, and the ability to be ranked third in the kingdom, only behind himself and his father. And Daniel doesn't really care about these gifts, but he still offers to interpret the writing. But first, he wants to remind Belshazzar of what happened in Daniel 4 to Nebuchadnezzar. Let's pick up in verse 20. But when Nebuchadnezzar's heart and mind were puffed up with arrogance, he was brought down from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven from human society. He was given the mind of a wild animal, and he lived among the wild donkeys. He ate grass like a cow, and he was drenched with the dew of heaven until he learned of the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of the world and appoints anyone he desires to rule over them. You are his successor, O Belshazzar. You knew all this, yet you have not humbled yourself. For you have proudly defied the Lord of heaven and have had these cups from his temple brought before you. You and your nobles and your wives and concubines have been drinking wine from them while praising gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron and wood and stone, gods that neither see nor hear nor know anything at all. But you have not honored the God who gives you the breath of life and controls your destiny. In other words, Belshazzar, you know what happened. You knew what came before you. But the actions that you have taken now have to have consequences. And yet you seem clueless to the reality that actions have consequences. There's no confusion about how you got here. And instead, it is just the natural outcome of your own decisions, own choices and actions. Let's keep reading. It says this in starting in verse 24. So God has sent this hand to write this message that is written, Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. This is what these words mean. Mene means numbered. God has numbered the days of your reign and has brought it to an end. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the balances and have not measured up. Parsin means divided. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Now, Daniel here is quite fearless because, again, remember, he is in his 80s and he is standing before the king declaring that his time is up, that he is no longer going to be the king, that the walls of the empire are going to fall, and the writing on the walls is there, that the kingdom is finished. And this is because of your own choices and your own decisions. Now, if you keep reading, the chapter ends very anticlimactically. Daniel's given the things that he has promised, even though he didn't really care for them to begin with. Belshazzar's killed that night, and Darius the Mede takes over. The end. After this whole buildup, this is kind of how it ends in a very, very quick way. Now, while this text feels unbelievable, I think there are a few questions that are helpful for us to wrestle with. Regardless of how you interpret this text, regardless of where you stand on the book of Daniel, I think there are some questions that we can all come together and wrestle with. First is the question of, where do I find significance? Belshazzar finds himself on the verge of death, and he begins to throw everything he can at the wall to claim and to identify his significance because he's insecure. If it's up to us, we will look for significance in so many ways, in any way, really. Oftentimes it may be love, creativity, achievement, religion, morality. And when we look for significance in these things, we're often left unsatisfied because they aren't supposed to give us our significance. See, when we look for significance in love, we aim to find fulfillment in someone loving us, knowing what they know about me, knowing everything, they continue to be there and continue to love me. And while this is cute and it matches what we listen to in songs, it matches what we see in movies about what love is, it can be quite problematic because it places the love of another person substituted for the love of God. And no spouse, no fiance, no boyfriend or girlfriend or partner of any way can be godlike in their love. So you will be left unsatisfied. Or how about this? If we look for significance and creativity and achievement, we ask, how can I stand out in this time of history? Where can my craft and my skills and my name carry on far beyond my death? However, this acceptance of this significance from our creativity is subjective. And it depends on individuals and the culture accepting whatever it is that we are presenting. For example, I was listening to a playlist on Spotify the other day, and it was a playlist that was kind of made for punk and punk-adjacent songs from the 90s and the 2000s. So you have different bands on there, such as Taking Back Sunday and Blink-182 and Lit and Eve 6, and there was some good stuff on there. But then this song, Bring Me to Life by Evanescence, comes on, and we can make an argument here that shouldn't even be on the playlist in general because it doesn't match the genre. Argument for another day. But back in 2003, this song was huge. I mean, it was everywhere. It sold tons and tons of albums. It was all over the radio. It won tons of awards. It topped music charts in multiple different countries. It as a song sold 3 million singles and 7 million albums where the song was featured on. For reference, that is the same amount of sales for the most recent records of Billie Eilish, Olivia Rodrigo, and Harry Styles combined. 3 of our biggest pop stars in 2021. And this one song outperformed all of them. This album in 2003 performed better than other albums it simultaneously was released with. Better than albums by Beyonce, Eminem, Justin Timberlake, John Mayer, Kelly Clarkson, Missy Elliott, Nelly, Coldplay, Jay-Z, Pink, and much less surprising, Nickelback. But today, this song probably doesn't crack the top 40. The music business is so different today. And because of that, they'd be really lucky to sell 1/10 of those records. Finding significance in creativity and achievement is based on cultural and subjective acceptance. We'll be left empty, and we'll be looking for our significance in other ways. Or how about this? When we look for our significance when it comes to religion, morality, we use those as tools to perpetuate our own agenda. We create these dichotomies where I am good, we are good, and others are bad. I do this thing, which is a good thing, and you do that thing, which is a bad thing. It pits us against one another. And sometimes this is justified by our religion that we use. Other times, it's by prescribing a morality on other folks. And many times, we use this religion or this morality to oppress those who are different than us. Sometimes who believe just the slightest difference, even in theology, even in Christian belief. And a lot of atrocities throughout the course of human history have been committed in the name of religion and morality. In an attempt to find significance in these things that can never provide us with this significance. Because the God that we love and the God that we worship is not defined by this religion or morality. If we are created beings, the way we realize our significance is to find out from our Creator. Religion centers on us performing good deeds for God. But as Tim Keller writes, the gospel is God through Jesus Christ has given me a perfect record, which I received by faith, and I live in grateful knowledge that he has accepted me forever. And this is where our significance lies. Secondly is the question, what are you running from? Daniel is among a group of people labeled as the prophets in the Bible. And in the Bible, there's this common theme for each one of the prophets. Because oftentimes they're speaking out against someone or something that is running from a situation. The writing is on the wall. You know what it says, but instead you're running. For Belshazzar, your kingdom is about to fall, and more than likely you will die, and your response is to throw a party? You're running from your current reality, your current situation. And I have to ask, how often do we find ourselves doing that exact same thing, maybe in the big ways or in the small ways? What are you running from? Are you running from responsibility? Are you running from past decisions? Are you running away from the obedience to something that God has laid on your heart? Are you running from dealing with the past wounds or grudges or hurts or pains? What is it that you're running from? Now, it's essential to note here that actions do have consequences. And for Belshazzar, the writing was on the wall. His kingdom was collapsing because of his actions. There may be something that you are running from in your life because you know that you don't want to face those consequences. But without the acknowledgement of the offense, grace can't be there. You may risk losing a relationship or facing discipline in some fashion, but if you continue to just double down and run away, you'll never be able to heal. There's life on the other side of whatever you find yourself facing, whatever you find yourself running from, but it may look different. So please don't wait till you get caught. Don't wait till it's too late. Stop running now, and you can allow your heart to heal. God is willing to lavish his grace on you. But church, Encounter, you have to admit what's going on. Lastly, what does obedience look like? Oftentimes in Christianity, there's this misbelief that we have that following God means that we would just avoid all suffering altogether. Yet here we are decades later, and Daniel is still a slave. He's been faithful to God. He's been deemed valuable by his oppressors. And yet, as an old man in his 80s, he's still a slave. Obedience is not rainbow and sunshines. It doesn't mean that we'll always feel God, because obedience looks beyond the facade, beyond the coping mechanisms we use to get by. Obedience begins with the reoccurring decision each and every day to face what we're running from, or as Christ declares, to take up our cross daily. From there, it is living into what God has made you to be. Thankfully, we do have significance, each one of us. And I currently am a student at Fuller Theological Seminary, which Joel recently graduated from, and we are often asked to reflect on this idea of what they call the CIQ, or the Central Integration Question. It is this question that, and I think it is a good question for all of us to think through and wrestle with. It says this: at this point in your journey, how do you envision your call to God's mission in the world? This is important for us to consider because while there are general things that we are called to as Christians, as we accept Christ, there's also individual actions that we are called to as well. So again, I want to repeat it one more time so you can just think about it one more second. At this point in your journey, how do you envision your call to God's mission in the world? Let me make one last quick point here on obedience. Daniel in this story, again, he's in his 80s. He was taken into captivity as a teenager and lived out most of his adult life as a slave in the Babylonian Empire. And then in his 80s, a different empire takes over, and he is a slave there. Daniel's story is one of faithfulness, and faithfulness through each and every twist and turn of life and every stage he finds himself in. He saw what obedience looked like and how it shifted in each one of these different moments and seasons, knowing what it may or would cost him. And yet, he was still obedient. Remember, here in this passage, he is foreshadowing the king's death, and yet he was obedient. It could have easily cost him his own life, yet he remained faithful and obedient. So no matter what season you find yourself in today, ask yourself the question, how am I called to be faithfully obedient? It is in Jesus that we find our significance, where we can face the writings on the wall, and where we embrace the faithful obedience to our call to God's mission in the world. Let's pray. God, I'm thankful for the story and the questions that it elicits in each one of us. May we be people who find our hope and our significance in you. May we be people who face the hardships that we are facing. May we not be so afraid that we run in the opposite direction, but may we instead turn around and face them. God, and may you show us what you want from each one of us, and may we be faithful and living in obedience to that. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Hello again. We hope that this message was a blessing to you and is helpful on your faith journey. If this is your first time joining us, or maybe you've joined us for a few times before and are looking to get involved further, we would love to connect with you. We have a digital connection card. You can go to encounterdc.com/connect. For every connection card we receive, we set aside some money to do some good in our community. We also have a special gift for you for filling out a card. You can share as much or as little information as you like, ask us any questions, and find out how you can get involved in the life of the church. I also want to thank everyone who supports Encounter through your generosity. Your giving allows us to do everything we do, from serving our community to creating content like this. If you'd like to give, you can go to encounterdc.com/give. You can make a one-time gift, or you can set up recurring giving. And now we encourage you to join us for worship. We invite you to listen, sing along, or use this time to just sit and reflect. Our hope is that you can experience God's presence during this time. So if you will, please join us in worship.
Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, yeah. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. hands. This is amazing. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, all that you've done. Sing worthy. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. Fear is trembling, death has lost its sting. The sound of your name, love is shining, courage comes to life at the sound of your name. In your name we have overcome. In your name darkness has been overthrown. Every curse broken by your grace. For my God defeated the grave. Come on. Hell is shaking, trampled by your word. At the sound of your name, hope is rising. We have been redeemed at the sound of your name. In your name, in your name, we have overcome. In your name, darkness has been overthrown. Every curse broken by your grace. For my God defeated the grave. He defeated the grave. Sing in my weakness. In my weakness, you are stronger. Through my sorrow, you bring me joy. In this chaos, you are my peace. Through the silence, your name resounds. In my weakness, you are stronger. Through my sorrows, grave. Come on, in your name. In your name we have overcome. In your name darkness has been overthrown. Every curse broken by your grace. For my God defeated the grave. For my God defeated the grave.